Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Balcones Canyonlands Conservation Plan Coordinating Committee regular meeting for November 14th, 2025. We're starting a few minutes after 1. We are in the Travis County Multifunction Room. I'm Travis County Commissioner Bridget Shea for Precinct 2, and joining me is Austin City Council Member for District 8, Paige Ellis. We are the co-chairs of this committee. First item on the agenda is public communication. Is there anyone here to make public comment?
No, we had nobody sign up today.
All right. So we'll move to item number 1 on the agenda. Approve record of decisions for the May 2nd, 2025 regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve it, or is there a presentation on the record of decisions? Is this different from minutes?
It's
Record of decisions.
record decision is
Okay, good.
what we call our minutes, yes.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I will make the motion.
And I'll second. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Item 2 is update on BCCP permit authority beyond May 2nd, 2026. And Kimberly Harvey, our BCCP officer, is going to present.
Thank you. And I do want to mention that our partners at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service could not be here with us today, even though the government has officially reopened. They are working on a reentry plan, and they're just not fully returned yet.
I'm just glad to hear they're still staffed.
Yes, so far.
Oh.
Great. So I'm going to talk today about the BCCP permit authority beyond May 2nd, 2026. As you know, our first 30-year term expires on May 2nd, 2026. And so I'll be walking you through why the BCCP permit authority continues beyond this original term date and how we are ensuring uninterrupted permitting during the renewal process. So the BCCP is currently in an active renewal process with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So this also includes updates to the Habitat Conservation Plan and the Environmental Impact Statement. So the goal is to ensure continued compliance with the Endangered Species Act and long-term habitat protection. So this regulation you see on the bottom, or at the top here, explains that any person holding a valid renewable permit, like the BCCP, may continue the activities authorized by the expired permit until the service acts on the application for renewal. So we are officially in the renewal process, and on this slide you can also see an email communication from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that acknowledges that we are in the renewal process and that our existing permit will remain in effect until the renewal process is completed and a new permit has been issued, provided the BCCP continues to show progress on completing the renewal process. And we are definitely making progress and working on that and moving forward. So beyond May 2nd, 2026, because we are in the renewal process, the BCCP will remain fully authorized. There will be no disruption to the BCCP permitting process, permitting services, and so we'll continue to support the community with streamlined development and infrastructure permitting. So this regulation is a standard federal safeguard to ensure that continuity. Some of the older BCCP incidental take permits, we used to call them participation certificates, made mention of the BCCP permit's expiration date and term. And so over the past few months, we've been getting some phone calls from concerned permit holders about what happens to their permit after expiration. And so this memo, while it's really hard to see on this slide, the memo in its entirety is also posted as backup for this meeting, so you'll be able to take a look at that. But we put this memo together to help respond to those public inquiries, to make sure that everybody understands that individual BCCP permits do not expire. They are deed recorded, they run with the land, and so all valid and compliant BCCP incidental take permits, participation certificates, remain active and enforceable during this renewal period and beyond. So the BCCB permit is not expiring in practice because its authority continues uninterrupted during the renewal process. It's important to note that, as we've mentioned in previous presentations, we do have to consider additional species that have been listed or may be listed. But as we go through the renewal process, our authority is only for the conditions of the original permit. So we will be continuing to issue incidental take permits under the conditions of this first term permit. And so being able to coordinate with the service and make this announcement will help provide certainty for development, conservation, and public infrastructure projects and planning across the region. So we just wanted to make sure everybody knew it'll be business as usual while we work through our permitting process. And that's all I have.
Good to know, thank you. I don't know if there's any questions at any point with folks who are here, but if there is, raise your hand or somehow let me know. I think we're on number 3, BCCP incidental take permit process, move to My Government Online platform. BCCP
Yes.
staff? Okay.
And I'm going to give the update.
I'm just going to ask, excuse me, Kimberly, is there a way to turn down the air conditioning? I'm freezing.
Oh, we tried.
You did? Oh, great. Is there any way to let media know they don't control it either? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. We can keep going.
The BCCP incidental take permitting process, we have a process for development that Travis County administers, and we have a process for infrastructure that the City of Austin administers. And part of our modernization of the permit has been to move this permitting process to My Government Online, which is an online permitting platform that the county has already been using for several of their other, we're not ready for that yet. That's the next item. So the county is already using for the development process. And so when you get on the county website to learn about how to get the BCCP incidental take permits, it will provide a link to My Government Online, which is the county platform. Once the permittee or the person applying for the permit creates an account, they're able to use that digital platform to apply for the permit. They can, when they log in, see the process as their permit goes through evaluation and issues that final permit, so they're able to see how that process is moving through the system. And there's also a big improvement for folks that have to pay for a permit. We're now offering online payment, where before they used to have to actually come in downtown with a check. The infrastructure permitting process is in the process of moving to that platform. We will be launching the test of that permitting program for infrastructure very soon. And so hopefully next year, we will be using My Government Online exclusively for BCCP incidental take permitting for development and infrastructure. The city and the county entered into an ILA that allows us to have city employees have logins that are helping to process BCCP infrastructure permits. And so everything is in place, and we're just moving forward through the test environment to make sure when we roll it out, it'll be seamless for our users.
And I'm sure most people know this, but can you describe what kinds, some examples of incidental take permits that people might be seeking?
Sure. So on the development side, incidental take is defined as, loosely defined as, habitat removal, impacts to the species. And so when development and infrastructure projects have a need to remove or impact that habitat, whether it's the oak, juniper forest for the golden cheek warbler, or whether it's ground disturbance in our karst, sensitive karst areas, they can get a permit, pay to take that habitat. And so for development, that might look like a single-family home, that might look like a large planned community, commercial development, CIP projects for the city and the county. So when there is a need for the removal of habitat in otherwise legal development process, then they come in for that incidental take permit. And for example, for infrastructure as well, if there's a need for a new water line that will connect to this new planned community, the planned community and the new water line are able to use the BCCP permit to get an incidental take permit for Endangered Species Act compliance. And going through our program just is a lot faster and cheaper with more certainty than working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for that ESA compliance.
And so are we communicating with the landowners about this new online process for getting these incidental takes?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's also been updated on the Travis County website, and once the process is in place for infrastructure, we will have another outreach where we reach out to the people who have applied infrastructure before and for the different infrastructure providers in Travis County. We'll also be updating the website, so it'll be really easy for them to click on the link.
What's the rough volume? Do we have a lot of these kinds of permits, or is there a little bit of activity, or am I stumping the judges here by asking?
So every year in the annual report, we list how many infrastructure permits have been issued, as well as development permits. And so for infrastructure, we see a couple a month, probably. There are definitely some slower times and some more busy times. A lot of people try to get their work done right before bird season, because our permit forbids vegetation manipulation during the nesting season, which is March through August. And so we do see kind of an upswing for infrastructure in particular. And for development, do you have an estimate about how many are coming through the program every month?
Every month?
Sure.
Well,
Just a rough estimate.
that actually get processed and fully issued a permit. It's hard to say. Again, it just depends. I'd say maybe 2, 3.
2 or 3 a month?
Yes, lots of inquiries though, lots of applications.
Yes, so an application doesn't necessarily mean an incidental take permit will be issued. There is no fee for people to apply to see if there are mitigation needs for their development or infrastructure project. And so a lot of times we'll get applicants that are just wondering what that avenue for ESA compliance looks like. And so our staff will do an analysis to see if their project overlaps on our BCCP habitat mitigation fee zones. And we have fee zones for the golden cheek warbler habitat, and we have fee zones for karst habitat. And so when projects overlap on these fee zones, the acreage of overlap is calculated, and that's how we determine what the incidental take permit needs to cover. And so we can provide that estimate of cost, and then that participant can determine whether they want to move forward with paying that and getting the final permit, or if they want to work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That's the 2 ways at this point to get ESA compliance for development and infrastructure projects in Travis County.
Very good, thank you. We ready for the next agenda item?
Yes.
Number 4, National Habitat Conservation Plan Coalition Annual Meeting Update.
Hello.
Hello. And please introduce yourself.
Yes, hi. My name is Olivia Lopez. Oh, live mic. And I am the Environmental Conservation Program Manager for the BCP on the city side.
Welcome.
Thank you. So, I'm just going to give you all a quick overview of the National HCP Coalition's annual meeting. This meeting occurs, annually. Every other year, it's held at the National Conservation Training Center in West Virginia, and in the off years, which is usually in an even year, it's held at a city, state that has many HCPs in the area. In 2022 is actually held here in Austin, just down this road at Doubletree Hotel, and it was a fantastic annual meeting, and Texas really set the bar on this national stage. where we have people all over the country come to learn about habitat conservation plans and to get an idea of what other HCPs are doing around the country to protect threatened and endangered species. Next slide. So here I've added the mission of the National HCP Coalition, but it is essentially, a gathering of HCP practitioners to share implementation practices, policies, and lessons learned. Whether it's on a small scale or large scale HCP, and also to help facilitate economic development and the conservation of threatened and endangered species and their habitats. So that is the mission of the coalition since its inception. I can't tell you off the top of my head when it began, but it started in California and it broadened to a national version where we can gather, again, HCPs all over the country to learn from each other. Next slide. So again, this year in 2025, we had our annual meeting at the National Conservation Training Center, which is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife facility. It's a beautiful facility. We were down to the wire because we were there during a government shutdown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but despite that, we still had staff there at the training center that were able to help facilitate this meeting and provide all of the resources. And it's a beautiful facility. I highly encourage, if you ever have the opportunity, to go to the National Conservation Training Center to attend, because it's in the middle of nowhere. And there is wildlife, and you're right next to the Potomac River. It offers a really great atmosphere for, scientists, practitioners, policymakers, consultants to get together in a campus-like situation where we can all just network and collaborate and discuss openly. Typically, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service attends this annual meeting. However, due to the shutdown, they were unable to attend. So attendance this year was lower than it was in the past. I'll give you an example. We had about 99 attendees at this event. Last year we had it at Palm Springs, California, where there was about 245 attendees. So that gives you an idea of how many service members attend. And not just service members, but state and local representatives are also in attendance to learn about, this federal program.
Great.
I wanted to note the keynote, originally was going to be a secretary from the Department of Interior, but at the last minute, due to the shutdown, she was unable to attend. So we had Heather Dreyer from the San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District. She is the CEO and general manager, and she provided a fantastic keynote for us. That really spoke to the challenges that we face. A lot of the similar challenges: climate change, an increase in urbanization in these really critical habitats where we find our threatened and endangered species. So this year it was held in West Virginia, and I'll tell you where it will be next year. Next slide. So here are some of the topics that were presented at the national meeting. I just included some of the highlights here. There were many more sessions. These are session titles, and under each session there are about 2 to 3 presentations under each session. I pointed out some that were, relative to what the work that we do and may be doing in the future, considering, monarch butterfly may be listed potentially in the next 4 years or so. But pollinators in peril, understanding energy HCPs and the things.
What is an energy HCP?
An energy HCP is essentially, for example, the LCRA is an energy HCP. The San Antonio electrical company, it's called CPS Energy. They have an HCP, and
These are utilities that, electric utilities that have, and why do they have HCPs? Because they have a lot of land around their power lines, or I'm curious about.
Yeah, both. They either are centered in an area and service in areas where they will have to do mitigation for take of threatened and endangered species, to harm, harass, or kill a species. CPS Energy was one that I invited to attend for the energy sector HCP because they do work in karst features. So they have a lot of karst threatened and endangered species that they could impact, and they have to manage and mitigate for. So, and also tied into that are bat-centric HCPs that do wind turbines. Also some bird HCPs that also have to apply for their incidental take permit and have a habitat conservation plan to manage and mitigate for to do utility functions. So it's an interesting concept. It's usually a consulting firm that shows up. We try to the coalition leans towards having the actual HCP the implementing group, like, for example, the BCCP presented under the Protecting the Nest habitat planning for protecting birds. So shout out to Kimberly Harvey for giving that presentation on the national stage. But yes, so yeah, to answer your question, there are these utility companies that need to have a HCP to do the work that they do.
Interesting.
And stay in compliance. We learned a lot from the session from the ashes, understanding wildfire and its impact on ecosystems. That was a new session added. California experienced, a lot of not wildflower flowers.
That too, but.
That too.
Wildfires.
I went afterwards. Wildfires. And so it was interesting to see what they've done to do some Firewise and some outreach to educate their communities on, because they do prescribe fires, and that in the public's eye is scary because of the impact of wildfires they've seen throughout their communities. It's been very, a negative light. So it was interesting perspective that they had, and they lean actually on their tribal communities to better understand the history of wildfire mitigation, wildfire prevention, and prescribed burns. And that was largely a California-centric presentation. We also had another Texas HCP, Williamson County, presented on out of sight, out of danger, managing listed species and cryptic habitats, and they did one on their karst species that they manage and mitigate for.
Cryptic habitats being caves?
Yeah.
It says out of sight, not out of danger.
Not out of danger, correct. So not out of danger, meaning they are doing work to protect those cave karst species. Next.
They may be out of sight, but they're not out of
No,
mind.
I got that.
It's a little twist. We try to make them a little flashy. Next slide, please. So in 2026, as I said, every even year, we're not at the training center. We will be in Washington, and we'll be in Seattle, Washington for 2026. We've already set the date, October 26th to the 28th. I highly encourage you to go to our website. It's hard to read on here, but it's the nhcpcoalition.org to join our mailing list. We're also on LinkedIn. It's a great place to see who else is involved in this coalition. We provide a lot of updates there as well. So, attending this HCP coalition just provides a wealth of understanding of other HCP monitoring efforts, restoration efforts, understanding the conservation strategies that other HCPs are implementing across the nation, and also sharing insight, lessons learned, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and just sharing that knowledge. So, we will be in, sunny Seattle in October. We picked that's the coalition decided on that state because we've been in Texas, we've been in California, we've been in Florida. Washington has a large bat and bird owl community that they work towards doing habitat conservation, and so it'll be exciting for us to learn about the BCCP does we protect the vireo and the golden cheek warbler, so it'll be very interesting to learn about what the other HCPs that are bird centric. And what they're doing for their monitoring efforts and how they are incorporating those, lessons learned from monitoring and using them to implement conservation strategies in the field. So very much looking forward to that. And if you'd like to learn more, again, please visit the website and stay tuned for an abbreviated agenda that we like to share with the HCP communities to see if they're likely to attend. I'll add that, we try to make these as affordable as possible. The coalition tries to make these as affordable as possible, renting, the conference space at a government rate. So it's leaning towards, government entities to attend. My hope is that we won't be in a government shutdown and we can have our U.S. Fish and Wildlife staff attend, our regional, Christina Williams generally attends as well, so it'd be great to have that, and I'm looking forward to seeing them in Seattle. So next slide, please. And here's a little plug for the Wildlands if you have not yet toured some of our wildland properties, and to get an understanding of what we do in the field and our monitoring efforts. But again, if you can make it to the Washington, I highly encourage you to attend. It gives you a good insight into what we're doing, conservationists, practitioners, scientists, engineers, policymakers, consultant firms, you name it, attend this event, and we learn from each other. So, I hope to, if you have any questions, please email me about this coalition. I'm actually the vice president at this time.
Congratulations.
Thank you, and I'll always be an advocate for this coalition and the mission and purpose that it has, and we'll always encourage others to attend. So.
Well, that's great.
Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
I don't think so. I think we asked them along the way.
I do have a couple questions.
Yep.
I know there's been a decline in the honeybee population. My husband's a beekeeper, so I'm kept up on more bee information than normal. So what was the gist of the presentation? Is it happening broadly, the pollinators in peril? Are they in broad decline across the country?
I unfortunately was not able to attend the Pollinators in Peril presentation as I was facilitating another session that was concurrent. However, I will tell you that all of the presentations that were given at this coalition will be available online. We're still kind of taking some breathing room from the madness of organizing and facilitating this meeting, but the presentations will be available online for anyone to view and download, and contact information attached to those presentations. There were, I believe, 2 presentations on bees. The American bumblebee, I know, is in discussion, and possibly some others that I can't name off the top of my head. But
Well, great.
they will be available, and when they are, I'll be sure to let you all know, and you can check it out and see if it's something worthwhile to attend in the future.
Great. Do you include those links on our website on the BCP?
We can.
Not yet, but we can. We
But-
can cross-link to the
I think
coalition.
that'd be great to make available to the public.
Yeah.
Are we seeing a continuation of more habitat conservation plans being created around the country, or have we kind of hit the peak of it?
I believe that we are seeing more, but currently in this administration, there's, a little bit of a delay. And actually, there was an interesting presentation that a consultant gave on permit renewal, and it was very surprising to see how many HCPs in the country are in a permit renewal stage. About, I think, 30 were listed in that chart. So we are seeing an increase. There's actually, the coalition has 3 subcommittees. One of them is an HCP improvement committee that kind of keeps tabs on changes with the HCPs across the country. If we're seeing an increase, a decline, people renewing them. There are large-scale ones, there are small-scale ones, there are multi-species ones, like ours truly. And so it's a group that is definitely keeping tabs on how the HCPs are changing. And, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, before October, we were hoping that they were going to attend, and they were planning to give a presentation about that very topic of the changes that they're seeing with HCPs and seeing them move more, east. Right now, there's largely in Texas. Most of them are in California. Washington and Florida have the most concentration of HCPs, but we're also seeing some more pop up along the East Coast. One of the presentations was on the piping plover, if I'm saying that correctly, which is a bird species along Long Island. And so that was an interesting presentation to see about what they're doing to balance monitoring efforts, conservation, and recreation, and balancing the two, because it's a very popular beach area. So that's a long way to answer your question of, yes, we're seeing an increase, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife would have a better idea of what that looks like, and our improvement committee is keeping tabs on that as much as they can.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. I'm a huge fan of our BCCP, and I tell people regularly all that the beautiful rolling hills that's open space, not covered with development, is because this community's made that investment and created this habitat conservation plan. How many years ago now?
30.
30 years ago.
Absolutely, and it was fantastic for Kimberly to share that on a national stage. We're one of the first, if not the first, multi-species habitat conservation plan in the nation.
Yes, that's right. We
First
we signed ours
yeah.
a couple days before a San Diego plan did, so we were
Yes.
officially.
The first multi-species habitat
Multi-agency,
conservation plan.
yes.
Very good.
Yes, and so it's a wonderful opportunity to put, not only to meet other people across the nation, but also to put our HCP on the national stage, wherein we can get, lessons learned and provide, that kind of networking.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on being the vice president of the
Thank you.
national organization.
We're like a voluntold, but I'll take it.
Oh, you didn't sign up for it.
What happens when you miss a board meeting?
Oh, that's what happened. Well,
is you get
that's a
nominated.
good incentive to attend meetings.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so
Anyway,
much.
Thanks, Olivia. The next item is golden cheek warblers and black-cap vireos on the Balcones Canyonlands Preserve. Presentation from BCP staff.
Hi there. My name is Bill Reiner. You got my name on the screen up there. It is a pleasure to be here, to be able to talk about the birds with you. It's my love. I love it. So I hope I don't go on too long, because it's very easy to get me talking about this, and I don't stop.
Good warning.
Yes, I will say, I include a lot of animations in my PowerPoint, so I may be working whoever is running the slides.
I think it's
pretty-
that guy.
pretty
That's me,
thoroughly.
Bill.
That's you,
Oh, no, you're
okay, all
just
right.
Give me a
okay.
little
Okay,
nod,
maybe
I
just
gotcha.
a finger up or
Gotcha,
something
nod's
like
good.
that? Okay, all right. So let's go on to the next slide then. So, wanted to start with just a little bit of introduction about what we do, what kind of monitoring we do for the species, and why we do it. You can see a map there of the Balcones Canyonlands Preserve. All the green areas are city, county, and other partners, their properties. Those black bordered polygons there are the 13 study plots where we are intensively monitoring golden cheek warblers. That has varied over time. This is a 2024 map, but the 2025 map that will be in the annual report will not vary anything from this. We don't have any change from 2024 to 2025. So we are monitoring, the environmental scientists with the city and our county partners are intensively monitoring those 13 sites across the preserve. And one or two of us devote several hours, at least weekly, to each site from March 15th to May 25th. That's the period that the males are actively singing and are easily detectable. After that point, the males kind of don't sing a whole lot. They're not as easy to find, but there's still a few nests that are not out, or we haven't found whether they've fledged young or not, so we'll continue to monitor until mid-June. After that point, it's kind of fruitless to be spending a lot of time out there because we don't find as much. We also, the birds that we monitor, we color band them. We put little colored leg bands on them so we can recognize individuals, and more than 70% of the males are banded. The females are a little bit more circumspect about coming to a net. We play a song, and the male comes in all hopped up on testosterone trying to fight off his rival, and so he gets caught in the net, whereas the female's kind of looking around saying, is there a mate there possibly for me? And if not, if she doesn't see anything, she'll just fly off. So we don't catch as many of the females. But we do manage to band most of the males, 70% of the males. And that's so we can easily recognize an individual, and we get better data on the information. So we can say, okay, that's Frank, that is Gerard, and
Have you
what
really
is Gerard
named them?
doing over here? His territory should be over there.
Did you
So-
name them? Have you named
we actually do have names for them, and we have different. There was one that when I was banding, he slipped out of my hands before he played dead, and I thought, oh my golly, he's dying. And so I loosened my grip, and that was just what he needed to slip out. I only got 2 of the bands on him.
Fooled you.
I named him Possum. We had another one who flew very rapidly into the net. He was Rocket. So yeah, we do have pet names for a lot of these birds. Next. We also have a really active group of volunteers. We have about 60 people who volunteer to take on a 100-acre search area. And it'll be outside those polygons there, so they're helping us cover more ground. And they are looking specifically for banded birds that get away from us. Basically, they moved far enough away that the biologists, the environmental scientists, don't catch them. And so we're able to cover a larger portion of the preserve, though it's still less than 50% altogether, what we're able to cover between staff and volunteers on this project. Now, county biologists also do less intensive studies, they call enumerations, where they cover much more ground. And that helps us to get more distribution data.
Do you frequently find birds outside the listed boundary areas?
Are you talking about the boundary of the BCP?
The little black
The
polygon
little black spots?
boundary areas?
They do move some. What we found is that once a male, and we're really only banding males that have been alive for about a full year. We've tried banding young birds the first year when they hatch out, but then they disperse. They don't come back to their parents' territory, and so we find very few of them. So we've stopped doing that. So we band a male who's already been there 1 year, and once they've established a territory, they come back. we have like 95% of the time they'll come back to the same place that they were or within a couple hundred yards of where they had been. So there's very strong site fidelity for the males. Now, the
And
females may
babies-
move
the
around.
babies don't pick nesting areas close to where they were born?
We don't have a lot of data about the young ones because we don't ban them. They're difficult to ban in that first year unless we ban them as nestlings. And because they're endangered species, you know, Fish and Wildlife Service is really nervous about us banding birds in the nest. And so we don't catch a lot of them, and the ones that we do catch, we often don't find because what I suspect is the early years is when they're wandering to try to find a new home. And they may wander a good long ways. So we don't find very many of them. And we don't have a lot of information, really, about what happens in that first year of life.
Interesting.
For how far away they go. Next. So the strategy that we're using, it takes a lot of time. We're spending a lot of time out there and a lot of staff, but what it does, it allows us to get really good, accurate estimates of the abundance, just how many territorial males there are. And we have our plots distributed such that they're fairly representative of the geography of the preserve and representative of the habitat. And so to some extent, we can kind of project from the plots out to the preserve as a whole. It's not as exact as it could be. We really would need something more intensive to be able to get really good data on how many birds there are across the preserve. And we did that in a 5-year study, an even more intensive study where we had a contractor from the University of Missouri and Fish and Forest Service who brought in other staff, and we did even more intensive monitoring, and she was able to calculate what the actual the abundance across the entire preserve is. And it was like something around 1,700 males, which would generally be pairs. We have really good pairing rate. But next, we're also able to gauge pairing success because it's not good enough to just know how many males there are. If we lose the females, they tend to winter in a different part of the wintering range than the males do. They tend to go farther south than the males do. If something happens to the southern part of the wintering range, we could lose a lot of females, and then we wouldn't even know it if we're just looking at males. So we're trying to get also pairing success. And then, of course, the gold standard, what we really need to know, what we're really trying to do is make sure that they produce as many young as they can. So how many of those pairs are successfully raising young? And then not only how many of them are raising young, but how many they do raise. So we can get that information with this intensive monitoring that we really can't get with less intensive monitoring methods. And then we also have 2 other things we're doing. Our banding not only lets us tell, okay, Frank is mated to Genevieve and they had 4 offspring, but we can also tell when Frank and Genevieve come back. So we can tell something about survival rates. We have return rates. That's what we actually gather. It's not quite the same as survival, but we get some sort of an idea about how survival changes from year to year. And then the last thing we're also looking at is dispersal, how far they move, if they move very far at all. The most dramatic dispersal we've had were a couple of birds that were banded in the San Antonio area who ended up on the preserve, and that was like 60, 80 miles away. That's the farthest dispersal I think that we have found for golden cheek warblers. And it's very rare. Like I said, about 95% of the males come back to the same territory, but we do have those long-range dispersals.
Do the pairs mate for life?
No. Some will. We haven't banded enough females that we can get really good statistics on that. We have had some banded females who show up with the same banded male in consecutive years, but we've also had some who shift around. So it's like single season monogamy, kind of. There's a little hanky-panky going on there. There's always that. A female will mate with another male. A male will mate with another female. But at least as far as raising the young, they generally are monogamous in that regard. They tend to raise the young together as a couple. So one of the things that we've been able to do, particularly with this, is we can do long-term monitoring. Each of those plots that you see there has been studied for at least 9 years, and most have been for 15 years. Oh. This is, I think many scientists would just salivate over these kinds of numbers, because usually a long-term study is 2 years or 4 years. To have it be 9 or even 15 years is extraordinary. And what we're able to do with that, we can determine trends in the population, and we can estimate those. And we can also evaluate if there are short-term changes. If we were only doing this intensive monitoring for a year, we might be picking a year where they had really good reproduction, and then the next year it slipped. What we found here was that in 2016, we actually did have some changes that we made to our monitoring, which meant we couldn't monitor it as closely as we could have, but we had a dramatic drop in the population. In 2016, it held in 2017 and 2018 and started to pick up again in 2019. By 2021, they had rebounded to about the same level they had been before. But we would not have been able to see that if we were not monitoring that closely. And we were also able to, our contractor with the University of Missouri and Forest Service, were able to trace that, or compare that to weather phenomena, and found that it corresponded with a strong El Nino event that affected the birds on the wintering range. It apparently was negative for the birds on the wintering range, and that led perhaps from the study, and I have the paper cited here later in the presentation, where it caused the population drop for a short term.
I can never keep track of which is wet and dry. What was you said El Nino or?
El Nino here
Affected them?
is cool and wet. In the northern United States, it's warm and dry. And it's the reverse for La Nina. Now, I don't remember what it is in Central America. You'd have to read the paper. But yeah, I thought it was similar. La Nina, did somebody else say that?
Different?
I was just saying, that's why we can't, none of us
Can remember what's wet and dry, because it's different north and south. That's not
Right,
helpful.
it is.
They need to label them northern or southern.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other trends besides the population drop and then rebound?
Well, I'll get into some of the statistics here that we've been monitoring this year. I don't think there's more on that slide. Yeah, okay. So this is what we monitored in 2025. In 2024, by the end of 2024, we had 141 banded male golden cheek warblers. This year, 66 of them returned. That was a 47% return rate, which may not sound that great, but it actually was better than last year significantly, 5 percentage points, and it was even better than the mean. Over that entire 15-year period, our mean has been 43%. So it was a good year when it came to the birds flying south, spending the winter, and coming back. We had good return rate. That was the males. The females, like I said, we don't band as many of those. We had only 18 banded females by the end of last year, and 6 of them returned, 33% return rate, which is the same as the previous year, but we don't detect them as often, so they mate and they can shift territories, so the return rate may well have been higher. Preliminary, we haven't crunched all the numbers yet. We're going to be doing that for the annual report in the next month or so. It shows about 150 territories on the plot, which was nearly 20 more than last year. So it's more territories. That's a good thing. And territory success appears to be about the same as last year. So we probably would have better breeding because we had more territories. But it was just because we had more territories. We also, one of the other things that we do is we actually search out and monitor nests. And this last year, we monitored a total of 130 nests. And this is so we can find out what actually happens when nests fail, if they fail, and which nests where are successful. Of 120 that we were certain of the outcome, some of them we can never really be sure. They're there one day, and the next day they're gone, and we don't know, did they actually fledge, or did the young leave the nest, or did they not? But of the ones that we could be certain of, 67 of them fledged. And that's a preliminary nest success rate of 56%, which was actually a bit lower than both last year and the year before. So they didn't have quite the good success rate that they've had in the last couple of years, but it was not really dramatically less, and I think there's one more there. One of the things we noticed is that there seemed to be many of the early nests failed just before the birds fled, before the young birds left the nest.
And what does that mean? Can you describe what that actually is? I'm not clear how a nest fails.
A nest fails. A nest can fail for a number of reasons. It's usually predators. There are a number of animals that like to eat the eggs and young of golden cheek warblers and other songbirds. We've documented with camera studies that Texas rat snakes are probably one of the number one predators. They can climb trees. They really do like eggs. We've also found that Woodhouse's scrub jays really like both eggs and young. They will eat both, and they will eat the young out of a nest. We've also had, believe it or not, fox squirrels. Those little critters, those bushy-tailed critters that you think just eat birdseed, they will eat what they can get. And they will eat a young golden cheek warbler if they can find it.
And that's just a larger squirrel that's got a bushier tail?
That's the common squirrel that we find mostly in the hill country. I think there may be a few smaller gray squirrels in town and farther east, but fox squirrel is probably the most common squirrel you have in the Austin area.
Is that the same, that's different than the rock squirrel?
That's different from the rock squirrel. Fox squirrel is arboreal. They're mostly in trees. Rock squirrel is terrestrial. It rarely climbs trees. The rock squirrels we have around here are mostly black and gray. The fox squirrel is gray on top with a rusty tail and a rusty belly. And that's usually the one who is raiding your bird feeder if you've got one.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. One of the things we noticed here was that food did seem to be less plentiful than usual, at least early in the season, and go a little bit further. And we think that may have been because of the dry conditions. So there were not as many insects available. And so that may have reduced the food availability. It may have been that some of those young went hungry. We don't know that for a fact. Most likely when a nest fails, it's a result of predators. Weather can sometimes do it. If we have a really bad storm, it can knock the nest out of a tree, or the young could suffer hypothermia and die. But it's more often predators. The lack of food may also have impacted the predators because they did not have other food to eat, and so they had to eat golden cheek warblers. They found whatever food they could find. And so last year, I know in particular, Barton Creek, if you spend any time on Barton Creek, they had an outbreak of katydids. Central Texas leaf katydids. They had a phenomenal outbreak. They were everywhere. You couldn't walk without stepping on them. They were just phenomenally present. And a lot of animals were eating katydids. We had really good reproductive success at Barton Creek, unusually, last year. This year, it went to nothing.
Because there weren't katydids.
There weren't katydids, and it
dry
could
much.
well have been that the predators then had less other things to eat, and so they were focused on the birds.
Have ant species been a problem in the past? I thought I recalled something in a previous report about that.
Red imported fire ants have also destroyed golden cheek warblers' nests. They will, well, I won't describe it in detail, but they will eat the nestlings, yes, bit by bit.
And haven't we had some efforts to eradicate the ants? or
Yes,
is that-
particularly
is that more
regarding the
different kind of-
caves. Yes, particularly when they're around caves, yes, we do a great deal of trying to eradicate the red imported fire ants. I have not done a lot of that myself, so I'll have to defer you to one of the other biologists.
Are there any educational resources for folks that want to deal with the red imported fire ant?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer for you at the
Or
moment.
maybe some just regular homeowners that don't want them around?
Oh,
and
yes,
Want to know
yes.
some environmentally friendly ways to get
I
rid
will
of
say,
them?
one of the techniques we use to avoid chemical pesticides, we actually use boiling water, which is effective. However, if you pour boiling water on plants, it can also kill the plants. So that it has to be used cautiously.
Sure.
I used to hear about cowbirds. Is that not as much of a?
Cowbirds we have not noticed cowbirds being a threat to golden cheek warblers. And it may be because cowbirds are primarily open country birds. They will go into wooded areas, but it's usually, just the edges of wooded areas. We have not found any evidence, very rarely, of cowbirds being raised by golden cheek warblers on the preserve. Now, farther west, where there's more cattle, more ranches interspersed with golden cheek habitat, such as Balcones Canyonlands National Wildlife Refuge, they have had a problem there. And so they do trap cowbirds out there. We actually suspended our cowbird trapping program in 2012.
Because there were so few?
We had so few. And we were really only trapping in black-capped vireo habitat because that's more open, and we had more cowbird trouble in open areas affecting the black-capped vireos than we did with the golden cheek warblers. We really haven't had any significant, maybe a few instances of golden cheek warblers being nest parasites for golden cheek warblers. Okay. We did have some dispersals this year. We have a few every year. I'm really grateful, one of our volunteers was able to find a bird that was banded at the Barton Creek plot, and it was a male banded last year, and the volunteer, 2 years ago, and the volunteer found this male more than half a mile away. That was quite a coup for that volunteer. We also had a female that was banded on our Forest Ridge plot. It was found and photographed, and that is a photograph of her, found by volunteers that was far off the plot. So it gets us some interesting information. And then one other one, occasionally, if sometimes we'll get one that actually moves from one plot to the other. The chances aren't really high, but we had a male that I found on the Cortana plot this year had been banded last year on the WJMT plot, which is about 4 miles away. And that's pretty typical dispersal. We don't have really long distance dispersal, maybe up to 10 miles or something like that. It's typical. All right. Anything else about golden cheek warblers? Well, before I move on to our other bird, the black-capped vireo. We don't have nearly as many of those, at least on city-owned properties. The county has more black-capped vireos on their properties. These are some sites that we had in 2024, the yellow areas. This year, we didn't have any on Bowles. We did not have any at Sam Hamilton. We did have one male show up at Barton Creek, and he was there for about 3 weeks, and then he couldn't apparently find a mate, and he departed. But they're primarily northern Cortana, central Cortana, Forest Ridge, and now we've had a couple now at Vireo Preserve and Wild Basin. So that's primarily for the city. The county will have some other areas. So they've historically had many more than we have. Next. We use similar monitoring techniques for the vireos as we do for the warblers, except that we have far fewer of them, so it's really wherever we find them, that's where we monitor them. Some of them, particularly at Forest Ridge, are right around the black-capped, or right around the golden cheek warbler study plot, so it's relatively easy for us to do. I say that because I'm not having to do it, but it's relatively easy to monitor the vireos while you're also monitoring the warblers. I have a feeling that the environmental scientists who are doing that might have a different story. They're driving them dizzy trying to keep track of both, but there's a lot going on at Forest Ridge. For the vireos, they arrived a little bit later in late March, and they can continue actually nesting all the way through August. But usually by the end of July, they're really difficult to detect. Most of the parents seem to have lost interest in doing any more nesting, so that's usually about the time that we stop our monitoring, in the end of July. Okay. And here's one of our banded guys. This is, that was Pichu, so called because that was one of his favorite songs at one time, Pichu. Of the 15 banded black-capped vireos that were there in 2024, 9 of them returned for a 60% return rate, which compares to 2024, it was 47%. So we had, again, with the vireos as with the warblers, we had a really good return rate this year. Next. And we only had 2 banded females, one of them returned, and amazingly, we're also banding nestlings of black-capped vireos. They're no longer endangered, so there's less hurdles to jump over with those. And we banded 45 in 2024. 5 of those returned this year, and that doesn't sound like a very high percentage, but as I mentioned, the nestlings, They don't come back to their father's territory because there's nothing for them there, because daddy owns that territory, so they've got to find someplace else. So we oftentimes don't find them. And we hope the females don't come back and mate with daddy, because that gets all kinds of problems. But so usually the nestlings from one year do not come back to their parents' territory. And so we oftentimes don't see them. So a total of 5 is a really good tally.
Hey, Bill, do you know how far the nestlings would generally stray from where they were born? Like, where do they go?
Not enough data. Not enough data to answer that. I think the county might actually be able to provide a bit better. They've had a bit more dispersal information than the city has. This year on city alone, the staff banded 8 adult males and 2 adult females. Now, the county banded others, and I think they had a higher tally than we did, but that's what was banded on the city sites. Plus, we also banded another 32 nestlings. And there's one of the nestlings there. That's a lot of body fat there. They lose that body fat, I think, or they get more feathers. So anyway, I actually saw that bird after it left the nest. So it successfully left the nest, and it was wandering around causing trouble in another bird's territory, I seem to remember.
What are the bands made of? Excuse me.
Beg your pardon?
What are the bands made of? What material?
We've used a couple of them. The silver band you see there is provided by the U.S. Geological Survey. It has a unique number stamped into it, so that if you only recover that band, you can get data on what the bird was that was banded, whether it was male or female, what year, what date, what location, and in many cases, other statistics that are gathered on that bird. But just, you can't read those numbers with a pair of binoculars in the field. So we put the color bands on. The color bands are a lightweight plastic, a resin actually, and we have to be careful with how we apply them. We've had some that had some sharp edges that we had to shave off to make sure they weren't cutting into the bird's legs and things like that. But yeah, we usually we'll apply 3 or 4 bands. The silver band is always applied, and then we put 2 or 3 colored resin bands on the bird as well, so we can recognize individuals. And one more on that. This is the same number of males and 1 more female than we had last year, but we did band fewer nestlings this year. And that may well have been because we had fewer territories this year in the monitored areas. We had 19. That was 5 less than last year. And only 10 of those 18 were known to be successful, 56%. That is a dramatic drop from what it had been the previous year. But this is a really small set, so I'm not sure I would want to draw too many conclusions from that. We've actually had kind of a surge of black-capped vireos on the Balcones Canyonlands Preserve, the City of Austin tracks. We have had them in the last 5, 6 years. They've shown up in a lot of places that they hadn't been before, and so I'm not too worried about this drop this year. I think it may have been the same reason, if you want to slide there, may have had the same reason as the golden cheek warblers that nests did not succeed, is that it was a really dry year early on. We did find and monitor a total of 34 nests. Of those, of the 31 that we were certain of the outcome, 10 of them fledged, and that's a preliminary nest success of 32%, compared to last year was 56%. So it was a much lower success rate this year. And yeah, I was astonished and rather unhappy with the success rate in the areas that I was monitoring. It seemed like most of the pairs were not succeeding this year, which was sad.
That's it.
All right, that pretty much wraps up my presentation. These are papers that have resulted from the intensive 5-year study from 2011 to 2015, or most of these, but also that first one up at the top, urban land cover and El Nino events negatively impact population viability of an endangered North American songbird from 2023. That is the one where our data right after that study was very important for indicating, oh, this is something that's going on, what can we match that to? And it looks as if El Nino was something that contributed to a negative negative survival rate among the golden cheek warblers that year. All right, and that's that. I think it's one more slide, but it's just the end there. These are what would be the equivalent of teenage golden cheek warblers. They're quasi-independent, but they don't know a lot of stuff yet, and they're constantly begging for food. And so, anyway, not too much unlike
Sounds familiar.
human teenagers. Yeah,
Sounds like.
it's that awkward age.
teenagers.
Exactly.
I have two questions I wrote down. Do these nesting pairs only have one round of kids each year, or do they go through multiple seasons of broods?
They do go through, okay, there's two questions there. In a single year, a pair usually has only one brood. And that has been the standard conventional wisdom, is that it is very rare for them to have more than two broods. We have been finding, not this year so much, but in other years, there's a lot more double brooding, is what we call it, when a pair will successfully raise one brood, and then the female will kind of disappear, leave the male to tend to the fledglings from the first brood, and she'll go off and start building a new nest.
Oh, wow.
And they have been successful. There was one year here recently where we had like 30, 40 additional young from second nestings, which is a significant, we don't tally those in our final tallies because we are not monitoring. Those happen late in the season, and we don't monitor consistently enough. And they're also harder to detect by that season. So we don't know that we have very good numbers on it. So that is a potential boost to our productivity numbers from those second broods.
Wonder if that's a survival instinct of, if it's
Maybe,
hard to
it
raise
may be.
young, maybe they're trying their best to, make sure there's more young.
Maybe it could be a result of climate change too. They're here longer, maybe. They can get here longer, and maybe the food is lasting longer, so it actually may be a benefit. I don't know that. That's pure speculation. But it seems to be, if the female in particular, well, I don't know. I'm completely speculating here. If there's enough food that she may think, oh, there's enough here for me to raise another brood. But that's pure speculation. I have no idea.
Fascinating. Well, it leads well into my other question, which was the dates of mid-March to late May. I know going into early June is when some of the surveys are done, but have you seen any drastic changes over the timeline that we've been doing this work to say that maybe we should be starting earlier? I realize this is probably a federal decision, but are they showing up earlier or later in the season as we end up sometimes staying colder longer or having, I think it was it this June or last June? It was actually pretty chilly.
Yeah, right.
Later in the season than I would have expected.
Right. I will say that the environmental scientists are usually chomping at the bit for the season to start, and so we're going out in March, early in March, to anticipate. We actually have a pool on who can find the first golden cheek warbler each spring. So there's no money involved in it. It's just bragging
Right,
rights.
do you win a
but it's-
Gatorade or something?
yeah. But it's, so we're eagerly anticipating the birds to come back, and so we're keen to note when they come back. We have not seen any consistent progression earlier that they arrive. I think there have been a few outlier reports that they may have been back in the last days of February, but not on the preserve. We haven't seen them. The expected average arrival date is about March 8th. I don't know that it's shifted that, but it changes dramatically. I think there was one year they didn't get back until March 14th or something, and then other years they get back in earlier March. So no consistently earlier or later arrival. I don't think I haven't seen anything where they're definitely staying longer, but we peter off on our monitoring effort in June. They do linger around, many of them at least, into July, but they're quiet by that time, and they're really hard to detect. So we don't have a lot of information about that.
That's great info, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks so much, Bill. I don't have any further questions. I think I peppered you with them throughout the presentation. So the BCP partner report highlights. Our partner staff want to come up and do the reports? Welcome.
Hi, I'm Linda Locke, Preserve Land Manager for Travis County, and I'll just cover a few of the highlights from our April through September report. So as Bill mentioned in his presentation, Travis County biologists also conduct bird surveys during the spring and summer. And one of the highlights for us this year was that we had a record number of black-capped vireos for the second year in a row, with 58 territories on both county preserve and parklands. And we have an active vireo habitat restoration program, and it's rewarding to see that the vireos are responding positively to it. And just last weekend, we had two of our staff, Paul Fushil and Maddie Ebes, they gave a poster presentation on our restoration efforts at the Society for Ecological Restoration in San Antonio, at conference in San Antonio. And then another restoration project we have been doing involves caves. We received some mitigation funding from TxDOT, and we've used those funds to hire a contractor to excavate some of our caves and improve the habitat for the endangered karst invertebrates. And we have already documented one of these species, the bone, a new location for one of the species, which is the bone cave harvestman, in one of these newly excavated caves, so that's kind of neat. And then moving on to some recent impacts to the preserve, we did have some significant tree and fence damage from the July 4th flooding on our Cotterley unit, which is, over by Nameless Road in the Sandy Creek area. Overall, though, we were very fortunate compared to, that significant damage that all of our neighbors had to deal with.
Yeah, it was enormous.
And then we had another issue in September when a damaged City of Austin main pipe discharged about 8,400 gallons of sewage water onto the preserve at Sass Canyon. And the city responded quickly to repair the leak, but unfortunately, because of accessibility issues, cleanup was not possible on the preserve itself.
So it's not really been cleaned up?
It's just going to have to flush through the system, basically, because it's too difficult to, it's on a very steep canyon, and the damage we would have to do is to try and get like a vac truck in there would be greater than the damage just from the sewage.
Is SAS Canyon on the site of our new
It is, yeah.
visitor?
Yeah, it's
VCP Visitor
that
Center?
canyon where we
Great.
have we're going to have
Chat with the city about that.
a hiking trail through. And that kind of brings me to the next topic, which is just an update on our future visitor center. So the 100% construction documents are almost complete, and so the bid package will go out sometime this winter, and we're still estimating that it's going to take about 2 years for completion of the project.
So 2 years from when?
2 years from now. The actual, it's going out for bid. We have to get a contractor. They're estimating about 15 months for the actual construction. So, 2 years is just a good guess, but it's an estimate.
Very good. We'll be putting that on our calendars.
I know.
Yeah, I'm eager
Believe
for
me, we are too.
the public visitor center to open. I think it'll be beautiful. It's a great location and
Yeah.
great opportunity to educate the public on it.
And that's all I have, unless you have any other questions about our report.
Any questions?
No?
Thanks.
It's a lot of good information in here, but sorry to hear about the sewage break. Yeah.
We're going to hear some highlights from the City of Austin report
Okay,
now.
great.
That was Travis County's
Yeah, yeah.
report.
We should specify that.
Okay, so I'll just give you a few highlights from the activities from April 1st through September 30th. BCCP administration, I'd highlight that the BCP staff work with our Parks and Rec department on encampment cleanups, graffiti removal, illegal overlook platforms, and unauthorized trail cleaning. I'll skip over some of the rare endangered resource management, as Bill covered much of the golden cheek warbler and black-capped vireo efforts throughout that time. But I will note that staff and volunteers censused a total of 268 bracted twist flower plants across the preserve. This count was low, as expected from a low fall and winter rainfall. BCP staff continue to conduct cave faunal surveys and are working in collaboration with the Travis County to do those faunal surveys, and also continue to do cave cricket counts on all assigned caves.
Can you say what a faunal survey is? Is that where we're looking for, is it flora and fauna? Okay, flora is the plants, fauna is the creatures.
Yes,
So you're just doing counts for cave creatures?
exactly. With the plant and animal control, we continue to do, feral hog removal throughout the preserve.
What's happening with that? Is the population continuing to increase? I mean, we've heard kind of various accounts of large, I don't even know what to call them, groups of hogs.
I don't know
lands.
the statistics on how, what the presence of it is. Are the hogs increasing or decreasing? But we are seeing them present on our preserves, and we're doing our best to address their presence, because they are, a non-native invasive species and cause quite destructive,
A lot of destruction, yeah.
yes, absolutely.
So they are a swarm of hogs, not a flock of hogs? A pack or a herd of hogs? Okay. Say it again? Sounder of hogs. All right, that's a good one to remember. Thank you.
Not a fun day if you encounter one, I hear.
But a sounder is a group of them, right? Yeah, thanks.
I'll also note that under land stewardship, the city was awarded the BCP Wildlands Division was awarded the Urban Forest Fund to restore approximately 4.1 acres on our Double J&T preserve. And we'll be working with American Youth Works and volunteers to reforest this restoration area. We've also began working, staff have assisted in pre-planning efforts to address a lot of ice storm damage and debris along the fence lines on Double J&T and our Cortana tracks. And we're already working towards addressing some vegetation clearing and storm debris removal on some of our
Can
other.
you describe a little bit in more detail about how you're doing that? Because there aren't roads in the preserves. It's hard to get to a lot of these fallen, damaged trees.
So we have a contractor that goes along these boundaries. How the process is currently, we have a pre-meeting to discuss points of entry that are accessible for our contractors. We note specific areas where hand clearing will need to occur because you can't get a vehicle. To your point, in those areas, there's some areas that have canyons. They're very steep terrain. You just cannot get a vehicle or a SEPI or any kind of mechanical things going through those areas. So it's a lot of hand clearing. The crews work, they start very early in the day to remove the debris. They cut some vegetation, from the fence border to about, at the most, 8 feet into the preserve. And we work closely with our facilities manager to oversee that, as well as our BCP staff to oversee that the work is being done correctly and not impacting the habitat.
Thank you.
Limited impact.
Thanks.
let's see, and I think, lastly, I'd really like to highlight and recognize that within this April to September timeframe, we had 20 years of dedicated service from our own Bill Reiner. So, 20 years of fantastic, dedicated, unwavering dedication, and we have a 30-year coming up as well on our staff. So I'll be speaking more about that on our next BCP.
Okay,
coordinating
great.
committee meeting.
Can you speak a little bit about the wildfire preparedness work that's happening? I think that's an issue that I hear a lot of concern from the public about.
Yes, so we're working with University of Texas at Austin. We're, to deploy sensors to measure water content in the soils and the soil and the trees. The data is ground truthed to understand the live fuel moisture data. And it's just a project to continue to create a continuous monitoring system for wildfire risk. We also work closely with the U.S. Forest Service. They're actually able to come out during the shutdown and help, remeasure some of the plots from the Baylor study to assess changes over time and wildland fuels along the BCP tracks, and also did canopy measurements with surface fuel measurements in about September. We've also, worked again to remove a lot of dead and down, trees in our BCP preserve that can, be fuel for wildfires. So we're doing a proactive approach to address the wildfire concerns and be as prepared as much as we can in the event a wildfire may occur. We have done, an extensive removal, of dead and down and other invasive species, again, to reduce wildfire risk in preserves, especially near, homes and developments that a lot of HOAs are always concerned about that risk. And we're working very closely to educate our HOAs about, what they can do for home hardening and home ignition zones around their properties.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other reports? There's an education document in the backup and a few other things.
Hello, thanks for making time for us at the end of the meeting. We've got lots to share, but
Welcome.
we'll be quick about it. I'm Kate McCann-Turan. I work for the City of Austin.
I'm April Rose. I'm with Travis County.
And so we'll go over briefly the totals for last fiscal year for outreach and education for all partners, city, county, the Nature Conservancy, West Cave, Wild Basin, Travis Audubon Society. So overall, over 2,000 events happened between guided hikes, ecological monitoring, land stewardship, lots of education, lots of programs and presentations, lots of trainings. And that included over 10,000 hours of volunteer time.
Wow.
It's pretty incredible, the amount of community support that continues for this program 30 years on, and that's really fostered by staff and administration. It's really nice to see. So I'll talk a little bit about the City of Austin. There's a great photo in there of so many of these Golden Cheek Warbler resighting volunteers with staff from the county and the city. Bill talked a lot about their work and how important it is in his presentation. There's also a great picture of planting and mulching the pollinator gardens during a volunteer work day at Vireo Preserve. This living classroom, a place for people to come and see and experience and get their hands dirty. And learn a little bit about some of the land management techniques that are being pioneered in some cases across the preserve. In addition to this robust and ongoing guided hike program, some of the things that were really neat, in addition to these great ongoing work days, are some of the unique events that happened in the last few quarters. So staff participated in Emergency Service District 4's Town Hall on wildfire to help address some of those concerns and really connect and hear from the community so that we can be good neighbors and partners together. World Migratory Bird Day out at Hornsby Bend. We projected videos of endangered species on the side of the Long Center at night so people could ooh and ah after the symphony at these incredible creatures that call Austin and Travis County home. There was a great presentation to Austin's Environmental Commission, and we welcomed groups from several different universities and colleges, had Councilmember Mark Duchin and his staff out. We took the City of Austin law clerks caving like we've started to do every year so they can learn a little bit about the challenges and ways that we might need their support as we manage these wildlands while getting them
Great education for the law
closer.
clerks. And we're going on a tour coming up in December, I think.
Oh, good. Yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah, it's nice to be in the habitat when you're talking about the habitat. We also partnered, like we do each year, with Austin Watershed Protection and other departments to train more than 30 City of Austin employees in Safe Cave facilitation in the classroom and again at Whirlpool Cave. And I'll turn it over to April to talk a little bit about Travis County. You should look at that photo. It's really cool.
Thank you, Kate. Good afternoon. So I'll share a couple of the highlights from the report. We've seen a really significant increase in our social media reach. We're getting, on average, almost 40,000 monthly viewers. So we've had kind of new communication staff come on that have really taken it into heart the impact of storytelling and really explaining and interpreting the value of the work that the biologists do and translating that into really compelling stories. And so we're seeing this wonderful uptick in the social media side, which is an important part of reaching out to the community since the BCP is in Western Travis County and we can't have everybody experience it firsthand, so we still want to share the benefits and the experiences the best that we can. So we're all, oops, thank you. We've been growing our volunteer cadre, so we work with master naturalists and others to facilitate guided hikes into the preserve. And so we just had a training at the Snowden facility off of 2769 to bring in 3 more. And so we have a total of, I believe, 14 now that help us tell the story and bring in more people from their networks into the preserve. We also have started working with Travis County Parks Foundation, and we're partnering with them on night sky programming, and we're sharing volunteers with them. And we found that this summer, we were noticing it was so hot and there was definitely a decrease in turnout and participation for guided hikes. And so our team kind of thought about how could we adapt our programming to make it where people might be more comfortable and inclined to come out. And so we capitalized on the importance of telling the benefits of the night sky opportunities, with the BCP having this wonderful dark environment creates wonderful habitat for all the migratory bird species that rely on dark skies to find their way on their migratory journeys. And so we're bringing people into the preserve more so at night in the summer when it's too hot to be walking on trails and there's less turnout for volunteer events. So we've been adapting programming and having really good success with that. People love, again, that storytelling, and looking up at the stars is a great way to connect with all ages and just all kinds of themes that can be worked in through a night sky event. So lastly, I'll just touch on, there's so many wonderful things to talk about. I could go on, but we're doing some in-school programming. We do outreach to about 6 schools right now, but with the development of the visitor center on the horizon, we're starting to pivot that to more so benchmarking and research about how to grow our capacity for hosting field trips. So we're still doing some in-school programming, but we're not looking to expand that right now. Instead, we're researching what field trips are going to look like at the visitor center and starting to prepare for that. And I was going to say something else, but I lost my train of thought. Yeah, that's probably
When it comes
enough.
back to
Yeah.
you, when it comes back to you, you can add it in. Yeah. So I'll talk too about partners at Wild Basin and at West Cave Preserve. Wild Basin has their artist in residence program, and so they one completed her residency and another began in September. They've got this great speaker and social series that they did before the pandemic, and now it's back. And so their topics this quarter included Mycology 101, which is something I know that so many of us are interested in, how these mycorrhizal connections influence our world.
In the soil.
In the soil. And also Beauty and the Bees was their other speaker, thinking about understanding pollinators and designing a landscape to support them. So just great ways to draw folks in to a place they might know, like Wild Basin, where they're able to come and hike unguided, and then connect in a deeper way to the Balcones Canyonlands Preserve.
Where's the walk to the waterfall? Where's the waterfall? Is that at Hamilton Pool?
At Wild Basin.
At Wild Basin,
You gotta come.
a little
Is it
waterfall.
still flowing?
There's actually a night hike there tomorrow. They'll be doing some night sky viewing, not through a telescope, but just storytelling with the stars at Wild Basin tomorrow. I don't think they're walking to the waterfall, but there will be an event there tomorrow evening.
They also hosted Westlake High School Senior Service Day, so 18 seniors came to help stage material for the trail stair restoration project that happened later in that quarter, with help from the Texas Conservation Corps, really improving that degraded section of an important trail. And then they also welcomed 25 students and staff from St. Edward's University for Tacos and Trash Service Day. It's an ongoing challenge in that area of,
I hope they eat the tacos before they go
exactly.
pick up the trash.
oh yeah.
Tacos and trash.
It is tacos
Tacos
and
first.
trash, yeah. We see so much pollution from the roads that enters the habitat along roadways, but especially in that area near Wild Basin and Vireo Preserve. So really helpful to have some extra hands there. April was talking about dark skies. We also are thinking about dark skies and migration for birds. At West Cave, they're so excited to announce that they put these feather-friendly markers, these decals, onto their great big windows in their beautiful visitor center in August of 2024. And they're really happy to report that they've had 0 bird strikes since installing those
And where was that?
stickers. At West Cave Preserve.
Where do people get those? Because we've got an interest here, I think, in putting them on the Traverse County buildings.
I've seen a lot, I've seen some from different organizations related to bird conservation, but I've also just seen folks buy it on the internet or make their own. At our office, we made
Just paper.
strings that hang down that have lasted us for years and years and really helped us to
Sensing a
decrease.
future workshop.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, right. Yeah, that's right. One of the art days at Travis County out at Snowden. And then West Cave Preserve also hosted 10 summer camp field trips with 185 campers. 3 of those dates included campers from El Ranchito.
Oh, that's great.
It
It's a
is
fabulous
great, yeah.
program.
They hosted 182 guided hikes, saw over 2,000 adults and over 400 kids. And they also hosted 2 education interns. So I just think this report in general, it never includes all of the work that's going on, but it really speaks to how all of these different partners play to their strengths. There are areas that can host programming on busy weekends and high demand and see families. There are others that are really great for self-guided tours, others that are really great at hosting, in-depth training and workshops and opportunities to contribute to the science, to the management of the land itself and that information.
We just had a meeting with EcoRise folks yesterday, and they're very interested in getting connected to programs where the young people that they work with can learn more about what's going on in their backyard on the environment and climate issues.
Yeah.
Great. There's space on these hikes and
Yeah.
work days for them, absolutely.
We'd love to have them.
Who's the right contact?
Either of us, yeah, both.
Either of you? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
we can definitely reach out and see what they're interested in and how we could collaborate, partner, what they're looking for, and where they might fit.
Yeah, we use kind of a clearinghouse email, wildlands@austintexas.gov.
Say it again, please.
wildlands@austintexas.gov for city programs. But we often find that, if we're not the right fit for a group, geographically often it makes more sense to connect them to Travis County. And so we work closely together, but I can make sure you're connected to April and team that way too.
I'm happy to help you coordinate that as well.
That'd be
So I can be your
fabulous.
first stop if you'd like.
Very good, thank you. Zara in my office can help you with that.
Great.
All right, well, this is fabulous. Any questions?
I don't think so. It was robust. Sounds like there's
Yeah.
a lot of good things
A
happening
lot of
out
great
there.
things going on. And then it says something about LCRA. Is that a written report, or is there someone from LCRA here?
No, we'll just refer you to the packet to read
Biannual
for
report.
their report.
All right, any final comments or information wrap-up?
I'll have one little preview. So as we mentioned, next year, May 2nd, 2026, that's our 30-year anniversary. So stay tuned for some information about opportunities to celebrate that event.
Excellent. And do we have a date set for the next of these quarterly meetings?
We're hoping the next meeting, it would be at City Hall on Friday, May 1st, 2026. I've heard from both of your staff that you are available. However, City Hall will not commit to reserving that room for me until the beginning of the year when all of council and commissions have
When they know
figured
their
out their
schedule?
schedules.
Yeah, great.
So we
I'll
have
keep
a
my eye
hold
on
for
it.
that date.
Yeah.
I'll keep my eye on it for you.
We know a
Thank you.
person.
We have good luck on Fridays. That's generally why our meetings are on Friday.
It doesn't conflict. Well, thank you all so much. This is always fascinating and great information, and I continue to think it's one of our best-kept secrets, but you're doing, I love that there's more social media outreach and more people visiting sites and learning more about these amazing programs and the work we're doing. So thank you all for your work and your service. And the meeting is adjourned at 2:41 on November 14th. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you.